Paget Lake, President of the Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber of Commerce. If we can all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. The Oviedo Winter Springs Regional Chamber of Commerce serves as a platform for enhancing business and community interest in our region. And we mostly are a resource for your business, providing education, advocacy, and connections. Now, before we start today, I wanted to take a moment to thank our doctors, nurses, first responders, and healthcare professionals out there helping others and saving lives. Thank you. I would like to recognize our elected officials. We have Oviedo Mayor Megan Sladek. And we have Winter Springs Commissioner Tiana Hale. And let us recognize our trustees, A Budgetary Service, Advent Health, Citizens Bank of Florida, City of Oviedo, City of Winter Springs, Duke Energy, Fairlands Credit Union, Modern Plumbing, Orlando Health, Oviedo City Church, Oviedo Mall, Oviedo Medical Center, Palm Tree Tech Center, and our brand new trustee, Waste Pro. Also like to thank our partners in progress, 419 Metal and Auto Recycling, Platinum Signs and Designs, our media partners, Falconics, Gizmo Productions, L Media, Look Local Magazine, Orlando Business Journal, Oviedo TV, Secoto Films, thank you for filming today's presentation, Oviedo Winter Springs Life Magazine, and our friends of the Chamber, Cavalry Gourmet, the Celeste Hotel, Collins Dental, Friendly Confines, Edwards Financial Services, Fast Signs of Orlando, Friendly Confines, ITI Engineering, James Evans, the Real Estate Celt, Gene Arthur and Associates, Kilgore Perlman, Legends of Winter Springs, Miller's Oviedo Ale House, Orlando Health Physician Associates, Orlando Sanford International Airport, Oviedo YMCA, Partika Group at NAI Real Vest, Rock and Brews Oviedo, Seacoast Bank, Seminole County Property Appraiser David Johnson, Seminole County Supervisor of Elections Chris Anderson, Seminole County Sheriff's Office Dennis Lima, Seminole County Tax Collector J.R. Kroll, Seminole State College, Tuscarora Nursing and Rehabilitation Center, University of Central Florida, and ViStar. Thank you so much for being our friends, partners, and trustees. All right, so our announcements today, I just want to thank everyone who came out to Taste of Oviedo. If you were out there, it was a wonderful event. Who showed up? Clap. We had an amazing turnout. We were just glad to have this event after it was canceled last year. So very thrilled that it went very successfully and smoothly. Thank you all that participated, that sponsored, that turned out, and really, really appreciate it. Next, we are leaving for our Capital Connection trip on Tuesday. This trip is sponsored by Kilgore Perlman and sponsored by Edwards Financial Services. This is our advocacy trip up to Tallahassee. We are very excited to be advocating for our businesses. We are the only chamber in Central Florida that goes up every year to advocate for our businesses. And our Health Connection Zoom series presented by Advent Health is a series that focuses on the health and well-being of our community. We will be having that Zoom meeting on Friday, April 9th at 9 a.m. Make sure to register for that and check out everything that we have going on. And excited to talk about our Ovations Awards that is coming back this year. That will be at the Celeste Hotel on September 23rd. So new location. It is sponsored by A Budgetary Service and Modern Plumbing. So I think we're going to start opening up our voting in June or July. So get ready for that and vote for your favorite businesses. And let me now give a huge thank you to our sponsor today, ViStar Credit Union. ViStar Credit Union is the largest credit union in the state of Florida, and their Oviedo branch is here to serve the Oviedo Winter Springs community. ViStar is a nonprofit and offers low rates in commercial and consumer loans and has been serving the community since 1952. Stop by and see them at the Oviedo location on Alafaya Trail and see how they can help you. And now, let us welcome our speaker today. Let me introduce Jason Edwards. Jason is the managing partner of Edwards Financial Services. Under his guidance, Edwards Financial Services has been consistently ranked as one of the largest financial planning firms in Central Florida and boasts more than 3,600 clients. Jason's passion is that of building lasting community partnerships with a strong emphasis on developing the local business sector and helping them retain their wealth. Edwards ensures that each of his clients thoroughly and understand properly and guided through the interesting dynamics of financial, insurance, and investment products. Mr. Edwards is truly a comprehensive financial specialist with a degree in finance and nearly 20 years of experience in the financial sector. Mr. Edwards has used this experience and background to achieve such milestones as CEO of the Year by the OBJ, among other achievements. Additional accreditations include Series 6, 63, and 65 licenses, as well as designations such as Registered Financial Consultant and Registered Financial Associate. He is also a member of the Better Business Bureau and a qualified member of the MDRT, an association consisting of those individuals that excel in the financial services field in the areas such as integrity and client satisfaction and education. Edwards Financial Services is a proud supporter and member of many chambers of commerce and is nationally recognized financial organizations. Let us welcome Mr. Jason Edwards.
If anyone had told you a year ago we'd be putting hair caps on our microphone. It's great to be here. Thank you to ViStar for promoting this event. Thank you for the warm introduction, Bridget. I'm delighted to be talking this morning about the economic outlook we feel for 2021, and I really want to approach it from two aspects. First of all, I want to try to keep you awake for 15 or 20 minutes, because when you start talking about finance, typically people glaze over. And the other aspect is I want to try to bring it down to the granular level. So what do we think the global economy means to Central Florida, and specifically small businesses? So there's a number of highlights that we want to cover, but one disclaimer is we're not going to advocate political viewpoints on either side. Unfortunately, because of the involvement the politics has had in the economy, as we start to talk about economic outlooks, there is a natural migration, right? Politics is now playing a bigger role in the impact it has on our economy, simply because of the legislation. So understand, I'm not pro or negative any side, so don't come up to me after going, hey, do you like so? That's not our viewpoint. But there are a lot of things that we're challenged with when it comes to economic. So let's talk about 2021. Well, I think we all agree that 2021 started off like the asterisks to 2020. It hasn't necessarily been a great 2021 to begin with, but from an economic perspective, there's a lot of positive data out there. First of all, we're seeing what we call a recovery period with the United States. And the reason for that is, as you know, prior to COVID, the economy was doing fairly well. I think most would agree, depending on your sector. In fact, it was doing better than we'd ever seen. So then you had a situation hit our economy that was not fiscally based. It was a man-made situation, right, a pandemic. So it had nothing to do with the systemic flaws of our policy on taxes or our issues as it relates to manufacturing or other economic opportunity. In fact, it was the opposite. We were humming along. So when you take something like a pandemic and that creates artificial hurdles. So for example, making people not go to work, which then cuts down on production, right? That's going to impact any economy. So that had the biggest impact on us. The biggest problem with it was because, as you may or may not know, this country, 70% of this country gets its revenue from what? Does anybody know what that gets its revenue from? We call it our GDP, but 70% of our GDP comes from what? Anybody have an idea? You can scream it out if you think you know it. I heard what? No, 70% of our economy in the United States comes from consumer spending. So you imagine if you take a situation where everyone stays home and doesn't spend initially, what happens? Well, economically we start to slow, right? But we know that with things like Amazon and Walmart online, the economy was able to maintain some type of growth, right? Because we still spent money, we just did it from our living room. That was the big difference. So now that we're seeing states start to open up, and we know that is different across the board, we're starting to see the U.S. economy thaw. So we're starting to see a lot of what we call an expansion, which means the economy is growing. Now, ironically enough, the only other country that is ahead of us, and I'm sure you may know who the country is China. And the reason China is ahead of us is because they were the first hit by COVID, and they were the ones that led the way on their expansion, meaning their lockdowns as well as production of things like PPE, etc. So you've got China, and then you've got us coming right behind them, and then you've got the rest of the world, Europe. So the U.S. economy is starting to expand. So those are what we call tailwinds. Those are things that are driving us, right? Pushing us forward. Also the inherent desire of most American workers to do what? Want to work. I mean, at first it sounded great. Hey, I'll stay home for a month. It's wonderful. But I don't know about you. I'm sick of Zoom calls. I can't wait to sit in a room and talk to people, which is why I'm glad Bridget started to open up these groups. Because again, there's that isolation component. And then the systemic flaw that comes from companies that are locked down. And you see that now when you call companies and they're answering their call services, answering from their living room. You hear the dog barking in the back, right? You know that you've got the guy who's at home. The quality started to diminish. So you're seeing those kind of things start to become what we call a headwind. Those are challenges. So we see the U.S. economy picking up. Now, another ironic thing about that is prior to 2021, the area that was doing the best was the large cap area. That's the big companies. But here's what's ironic about large companies. They're like tankers. They take a long time to move. So when they started shutting down and closing, guess what? Our economy stalled. But now as states are opening up, guess what sector is leading the growth in the U.S. market? What expansion? Small companies. Because they're like speedboats. If you own a company, you know what I'm talking about. You can close this week, but theoretically, you can open next week. So now the small cap sector, we call it, is doing phenomenal. It's almost up 32%, which is ironically a contrast compared to what was last year when it was being destroyed because your mom and pops were closed. However, again, from a geographical perspective, there are areas of the country where small caps are doing very well. And as you can imagine, areas of the country where one of our offices is located in New York City, small companies are not doing so well. So you've got some unique challenges there. Another challenge that we faced that became very evident with 2020 was the manufacturing sector. Now again, not getting into politics, there was a strong political agenda, previous administration, to try to get manufacturing ramped back up in the United States. When 2020 hit, a lot of things became very evident to us as the average person. So for example, our pharmaceutical drugs were traditionally 100% made where? Not in the United States. So now you have what they call distribution channel issues, right? So if a country that makes toilet paper, as an example, which I know we have plenty of toilet paper, right? But if it makes something and it shuts down, what happens to our ability to get it? It's gone. And if you can't control that country and that ability to distribute, what happens to your distribution? It's gone. So 2020 exposed some of that. So to illustrate, in Rochester, New York, how many are familiar with the Kodak deal? Okay, and the Kodak deal was a great example of what? Well, the U.S. government recommissioned Kodak to make antibiotics. So there's been a push to try to reform how we do things, which ultimately will work better for us as a country because then you don't have those distribution, what we call disruptions. You also probably see that if you order anything now, whether it's Zoom, Amazon, Walmart, things used to take a day to get to, now they're taking how long? A lot longer. And that's, again, distribution disruption. So that's some of the challenges that we're facing. The other things that we would face as it relates to political change is things like transport costs. Now, how many people have noticed the gas going up? Okay. Now, initially, that may not be a big deal to you. You may be fine with, hey, you know what, I don't mind paying $1 a gallon more. That's great. But here's the problem, and this is the ripple effect of how our U.S. economy is integrated. If gas goes up, costs for trucks that deliver your groceries goes up. And then what happens to the company that makes the groceries? What do they do with that cost? They pass it on to you. That's called inflation. Now your cost for yogurt goes up. Well, again, remember what I said earlier? 70% of our U.S. economy is driven by spending. If you have less money to spend because you're spending more money on groceries and the cost of living, what happens to your spending habits? It goes down. So now what happens to our economy? It contracts. That's a term you may have heard of. And when an economy contracts, you have the potential for a recession. You've heard that term, right? So these are the ripple effects that you see. Now, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but these are ripple effects of things that we see. And people sometimes don't understand how policies or changes to little things like gas can impact you. Now, what does that mean to the Florida economy? Well, two things. First of all, because of Florida's aggressive policies on unemployment, or rather on opening, we have the lowest unemployment, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the United States. Everybody know that? We're well below the national average. That's a good thing. The other good thing is because, again, the fact that we have an economy that was reopened quickly, it's now caused what when it comes to migration from other states? What do we see? How many people see New York tags or California tags or other tags around the state? A lot. So you're seeing a lot of new people move to the state of Florida, which means we're going to have expansion, right? That correlates to construction. That correlates to rent. All of those different aspects. So that means on a local level, the state of Florida is going to be doing fairly well in a short duration. But here's the challenges that come along with that. And those that are our officials here know this. You're going to have more traffic. You're going to have more people in school, right? You're going to have all this infrastructure challenges. So again, from an economic perspective, those industries that cater to infrastructure, that cater to roadways and expansions might do fairly well. Those that cater to service-related matters will also do fairly well. Because if you have 100 new people moving into your local economy, what does that mean to you? Whether it's a bank, whether it's a hospital, whether it's a food shop like a Rock and Brew, that means more bodies, right? More individuals that we can service. So from a state, things look fairly bright. We also are one of the few states that do not have what? A state income tax. So again, there are always two schools of thought. Living in New York City, we have some of the highest taxes you can imagine, trust me. So because of that, a lot of countries, or a lot of companies rather, domicile in different states. And they do that because they want to avoid the taxation. So in the state of Florida, you have the favorite tax environment where there's only just what? Sales tax. So because of that, again, you're going to groom or invite more small businesses, individuals that are trying to build the economy. And again, here's another interesting factor. 80% of the U.S. economy, and this is what I always find ironic because most government bills don't pay small businesses, but 80% of the U.S. economy is driven by small businesses. You don't get a fair shake, and most people don't seem to care about small business when it comes on the national scale. But do you realize that 80% of our country is driven by small businesses? How many people in here are part of a small business? Okay, that's half the room. So you think about it. If you don't have economic policies, if you don't have subsidies and cash, if you don't have legislation that promotes small business, what are you doing to the U.S. economy? You're ultimately going to handcuff them. So we see that things are looking fairly bright for 2021. I think you want to avoid one thing, and I'll tell you right now, news and media. I hate to say that, but there is so much gloom and doom out there, but when you look below the surface, there's a lot of positive data. As we start to get out of this COVID environment where we start to see groups associating and companies expanding and opening up, there's tremendous potential. And we see that. Now, the companies that have exploited that potential have been the large, what we call box stores, right? Amazon, Walmart, those companies that could modify their supply chain and do what we call online purchasing or online transactions. And the ones that got hurt the most were, Bob, the pizzeria down the street. Unfortunately, that was a big issue, but now we see that starting to correct itself. Another thing I would be concerned with from an economics perspective is the sectors or the marketing strategies that you employ. So what do I mean that? Well, if you have a marketing campaign and you're trying to earmark your funds for where do I put my money for the future, it has to be coinciding with where we see the economic expansion. Does that make sense? So if I advertise, widgets, and no one's going to buy widgets for the next 12 months because widgets are banned in this particular state, then that would be a fool's errand, correct? So from an economic perspective, I'd be more than happy to talk after, but from an economic perspective, you want to be very, very tactical on your strategies. And that goes for any industry, whether it's a chamber of commerce, a bank, hospital. There's particular areas in the market or in the United States that are going to expand. And unfortunately, there are particular areas that we're going to see some contraction. Areas that we're going to see some changes because there has been a large political shift. And whenever you have an administrative shift, you have different policies. Right or wrong, they're just different. So you've got to be able to adjust your business model to that. Make sense? I think 2021 is exciting here. I think there's going to be a little bit of what we call a hangover. We're coming out of a scenario that you had unprecedented shutdowns. We had political policies on the fly. And fortunately now we have a vaccine that I'm sure everybody's gotten at least one shot, maybe two by now. Now on your tables, you're going to see I also put an insert that has the particular information that we discussed, and there's some more elaboration as it relates to financials. You'll see it with my business card there. So feel free to take it. It's the big flyer that's stapled with a business card. Feel free to take that because there is some data there that you may find interesting. Or if you can't sleep at night, pull that out, start reading it. As you glaze over, you'll be out in about 5 minutes, trust me. Okay? So with that, I'd like to open the floor to any questions. Any questions you have is a great time to pick my brain. And I know there's got to be a lot of questions. Come on, Jerry.
The stimulus package and all that stuff, are we as beneficiaries of this stimulus package, are we going to be paying that for the rest of our lives through our kids and our grandchildren and so forth?
I think grandchildren is being very liberal. I think that might even be great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. So the stimulus package, depending on which one you're referring to, there's been several. My concept on the stimulus package is twofold. One, you have individuals that have had a rough time in their life, there's no doubt. And those individuals, deserve to have some of their money, because all they're doing, folks, is giving us our money back, right? They're giving what you put in, and they make you feel good about it. Here, I borrowed your $100, here's $50. However, there are individuals that do need some help. And I think that's a valid point. Where the concern lies, to what Jerry's point is, it's like you and I. Before we make a large purchase, we don't just, I don't care what's in the checkbook, I'm just gonna write a check. We look at our checkbook, right? And we say, well, I've got $100, I can only spend $100. Congress doesn't necessarily look at things that way, we all know that, right? I got $100, I'm gonna spend $1 million. Yeah. So the problem is, that $1 billion is coming out of our revenue. Now, there's only two ways that gets paid. One, you cut expenses, and has the government ever cut costs and expenses? We all laugh, I don't care what your political aversion is, but you know they do not cut costs, especially not their salary. Or, you raise taxes. That's it, that's the only two ways you can do it. Because the debt is gonna be there. So I think the problem you're gonna have is as we spend more money, if it's not tactical and focused, so a great example is this. if you spend the money in an area that you knew generated revenue for local states, let's say you spent money in an area where sales tax would get more money, right, more profit, or income tax on a state level would get more profit, then you actually could make it where it would pay itself back. Is that logical? But if you're spending that money in particular projects that have no tax revenue, so let's say I'm building more buildings, or I'm doing bridgeways, but there's no tolls, then all I've created is a debt that can't be paid back. So the only way the government does that then is obviously increases your income tax. So I think it's going to be a massive tax burden. And here's the other thing that people don't get into economically. Does everybody know that the United States used to be a AAA rated country? Everybody know that? Everybody know that we lost our rating? We went from AAA to AA. Now, that sounds like a little thing, but those ratings are what we use to pay our debt. So if our AAA rating drops to our AA rating, what do you think cost of our debt was? Think it went down? No, went up. So again, if they were your banker, and they called you every week and said, hey Jerry, I got a great plan, listen. So the mutual fund you got, it went down in value and I'm going to charge you more. You probably would terminate them. So did that answer your question? Questions? Other questions?
What is the AAA rating?
Okay. So if you think about it, AAA is the best, AA is not too bad, and A is okay. And now obviously you found the alphabet, B, C, D, E. So every country is rated by its credit worthiness, which means its ability to pay back its debt and its possibility of default. So as the United States being the largest country in the world economically, we always had a AAA rating. That was the one thing we bragged about. So you knew as another country, hey, if I invest in the United States, I'm probably going to get my money back. Well, we went from AAA down to AA. So that means from a management perspective that we are mismanaging our spending. So now if we've already gone from AAA to AA, what do you think the possibility is that style of spending or that style of management might be going to single A? So again, these are little residuals that you have to understand because we don't see it necessarily right away, but you will eventually see it, right? I mean, if you're making $100 a week and your taxes go from 20% to 30%, that's less money. And the problem is that's still an impact. I don't care what it is, $1 is $1. But again, using that same concept, remember we talked about oil? The problem is that if you have less money in your pocket and you already use that money to spend for things you like to buy, if there's less money, there's less spending. And then if you've got an economy like our economy, which is not a manufacturing economy, we're a consumer of services, particularly Florida, right? Tourism, going out to eat. There's less money there, and that can have an impact. Does that answer it? Yes, ma'am.
Two questions. One is, when did we go from being AAA to AA? And the second one is, what should we expect in the way of pension in the years to come?
So AAA to AA, we actually went 4 years ago. Three and a half, 4 years ago. Again, I think it was right before President Trump took over. I'm not sure. It was around that time period. Inflation, I think you're going to see it already in slow increments. And I'll tell you a good indicator of inflation, yogurt. Now it sounds funny, but yogurt. Now can anybody remember what the container of a yogurt looked like 7 years ago? And now you notice you go to Publix and they've got these little shot glasses, 4 for $10. But it's really just the same one yogurt split 4 ways. That's an indication of what I call purchase power. So sometimes inflation sounds like a really cool thing to say, but what we're talking about is the cost or the size of something you're buying. So I use yogurt as an example because those are containers that are and you'll notice on like in Publix, you'll see the weight per ounce. It'll say how much you're paying per ounce. You watch, those little labels will start changing. And you'll see it go up a little bit, go up a little bit, go up a little bit. Yeah.
So, same thing with Girl Scout.
Same thing with, well, that's it, right? There's another bit. You see a box, right? And here's this little Girl Scouts. But hey, I got cookies. $50,000 for one box. That's inflation. Because what's happening, to use that as an example, that's a great example of where we see the oil, for example. If the Girl Scout cookie company producing the box has to pay the farrier, in this case the truck driver company, more money to transport, right? Or the company that does the fulfillment, which is the boxing, has to pay more money for the cardboard to get to them. Those are all costs, right? All those get passed on to whom? Us. So again, I don't care about politics, that's just fact. So that's where inflation comes in. So you'll just start noticing little items that were $2 will be $2.05, $2.06, $2.07. And that's another reason that we talk to a lot of our clients and the negative of just keeping your money, for example, on an investment side, in cash. Because a lot of people like to leave their money just in cash. They don't know what to do. The problem is, remember what $1 bought 10 years ago. I mean, a great example is a can of Coke. 10, 15 years ago, what was a can of Coke in a machine versus today? That's inflation. Other questions? Great questions, by the way. Yep.
Where do you see, with you being a financial person, where do you suggest putting your funds with looking at the future right now?
So that's a great question. So there's a couple of factors that you want to consider when you're talking about investing. First of all, when you talk about your time horizon, meaning from point A to point B, when do I want those monies to be used? Secondly, you want to talk about your current debt. How much debt do I have? If something happened, God forbid, to my job, can I pay that off, right? And then third is what that money's dedicated for. Now, I will tell you that there's never a perfect time to invest, because that is a misnomer. People get excited. That's what's interesting about the stock market. When the market's on a tear, what does everybody want to do? Oh man, the market's doing great, I can't wait to invest. And when the market recedes and drops, what does everybody want to do? Oh, I don't want to invest. Now let's think about that logic. Imagine running to Walmart and going, hey, everything is 400% overpriced. I want to buy. And then when they have a big sale at Walmart, what do you say? No, I'm out. That's the problem with that methodology, you understand? So for some reason, because of the way we think, we take the sales and inexpensive process and we love it when it comes to purchases, but when it comes to the stock market, for some reason, the average investor doesn't get it that way. And I'll give you a statistical number. From 1994 to 2004, the average S&P yield was 7.8%. That was the rate of return. What do you think the average person did? Not us, but the average individual on their own. Anybody want to take a guess? Come on, Jerry, you got a guess, I'm sure.
245.
What did you say? Well, what was their rate of return? So the average stock market yield was 7.9%. The average person did what during that same time period? You think? Okay, she said 5.
2.
Who said 2? Okay, 3%. Now, same investment, right? Same investment, then the same resource. But why did they lose almost more than half? Because of emotion. So to go to your point, I think the investments right now in particular areas are things that are US-based, domestic, but I also think you have to have certain strategies like dollar cost averaging, consistent investing, because those help mitigate a lot of this. But I do think the US economy is still the most robust and strong economy. I don't know how that's going to be in a year or two. I don't know what the shift is going to be, because even now we're starting to see shifts of manufacturing changing, where some plants are considering moving those plants elsewhere now because there's different components. But things like the small cap arena and the mid cap, obviously healthcare has a large insulation, right? I mean, people are getting older, the baby boomer generation, you deal with COVID, other global issues. And then technology, we call them the FANGs, those do really well because technology is not pigeonholed by a lockdown. In fact, most technology companies are probably advocating for more lockdown because they do very well, those online shopping groups. Does that make sense? But what I would say, Bridget, is meet with your financial institution or us would be glad to help. But really try to get something that's customizable to you, but you want to take all the emotion out of the equation. Because when you try to, well, I feel this way or I feel that way, that's probably a recipe for not having enough money when you need it.
How have you felt about the apps like Robinhood and all the new?
So we have people in the healthcare sector here, right? Yeah. So what do you guys think about a person having a kidney stone or some kind of liver issue and say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use WebMD. And I'll get a scalpel out and a mirror and I'll be ready to go. Well, that's what I think about Robinhood. okay? Unfortunately, and here's the other component, is those institutions have no real fiduciary liability. What does that mean? Well, we're a fiduciary. Not all firms are, but we are. And that means by law, we have to do what's in the best interest of the client. But when you have an online resource, has anybody met or seen the CEO of Robinhood? Anybody? Yeah, have you seen him? He did his video conference in his kitchen. He looked like he just woke up off a surfboard, and he's literally like, hey, I don't know what I did, but yeah, I mean, that's who's running your money. So you wouldn't come into my office and I look like I just woke up out of bed, I got a Coca-Cola can, I'm wearing beach shorts, hey, give me your money. But with online resources, you don't know who the institution is, right? You don't know what their capabilities are. You also don't know who's driving the ship. I'll give you a great example. Anybody remember a magazine or read a magazine called Smart Money? It's a pretty popular magazine. Does everybody realize that magazine's published by Fidelity? See, a lot of these organizations are run by big organizations. So again, they don't disclose their motive, right? So if I'm a Fidelity magazine, even though you don't know it's Fidelity, all the articles about Fidelity in that magazine, you think they'll be pro or negative. So same with Robinhood or anyone else. If it's a smaller institution or it's an online resource that you don't know anything about, there's the propensity, I'm not saying there is, but there's the opportunity, right? For someone to write them a check as a sponsor, and all of a sudden now you're getting these blurbs about this share or that share. So I think it's a dangerous environment, I really do. NASDAQ did a consolidation, or not NASDAQ, FINRA did a report, the SEC, on online trading. Online trading equates for about $4 trillion a day now. And you know how many people make money, what the percentage was, when they did the actual, what you put in and what you took out. Because you hear a lot of people go, man, I made a ton on Bitcoin. But then I'll ask them, did you sell it yet? No. Well, so it's not what you're making, it's what you take home, right? So do you know what the percentage of online traders is that make money? Take a guess, anybody? 5%? Okay, good guess. Anybody else? 1%. So 1% out of $4 trillion, those people actually make a profit. That's a huge difference. So I would be careful. Even when we have clients that want to do the funny money, I'll say, go ahead, do Robinhood. Take $5 grand and that'll be it. But that's all I'm going to give you. And then I'll take my money, and usually what happens after 3 years, they're like, okay, here's my $5 grand back. Because we'll always typically beat it. Make sense? Yep. Yes?
So there are so many e-currencies out there now, since you just touched on Bitcoin. Do you think that those might rise to the top and eventually be a main form of currency?
So here, I think cryptocurrency is the next bubble. And I think when it implodes, it can have a devastating impact on our economy. And there's a number of reasons. First of all, it's not governed by any country. So you can't tie, like, for example, with the US dollar, you have some forecasting measures, right? If you're looking at a country, and the country politically is unsettled, it's doing poorly, starting to collapse, what do you think's happening to their currency? It's going to go down. You don't have that with cryptocurrency. Literally tomorrow, something could happen, and we're done. Other things are fraud. Now, everyone knows with your cryptocurrency account, do you realize if you lose your password, what happens to that money? It's gone. You can't call anybody and go, excuse me, I had $2 million in this account and I can't find my password. Guess what? It's gone. So there's a lot of issues. And I mean, there's also what they call in and out, exit. So there's a huge volume that allows you to buy. Everybody know that? Anybody can jump on. But when you want to sell cryptocurrency, there could be a bottleneck. So imagine a run on cryptocurrency and you're trying to get your money out and all of a sudden it plugs up. What do you do? Who do you call? Who do you complain to? Who do you sue? So it's a very dangerous. I personally, I never advocate cryptocurrency. I think it's going to be a huge mistake. I think it's going to become a massive bubble. And the bigger challenge is the more companies start to engage it, then the reach is more far-reaching, right? Because now you've got car sector, or you've got hotels or other industries. So I think it's a very dangerous precedent. That answer you? Good? Yeah? Okay. Megan's always got great questions. All right. Anyone else? I see people nodding and saying, so come on, ask the question. I don't mind. There's no yes, please.
What do you think of target retirement funds to kind of take the emotion out of a low cost?
Okay, so she's calling it, yeah, those are called lifestyle funds. And those were introduced. Again, this is a great example of government getting involved in something that they don't necessarily grasp. So target date funds are, everybody know what those are? Those are the funds we say, you know what, I'm going to retire in 2045. So what you do, you click on 2045 and you say, okay, I'm good, I'm done. And so what happens is the blend of the fund will change over the years. As you get older, less will be on the aggressive side and more will be on the conservative side. That was really instituted by the Department of Labor, and the reason was it's because 401ks. A lot of employer-sponsored plans had a liability. If they weren't giving guidance to their employees, and someone's getting retired in 2 months and says, you know what I'm doing? I'm putting all my money in Bitcoin. Yeah! And it crashes. These institutions were being sued, right? Your employer's like, hey, wait, I didn't know anything. So what happened is legislation came out and said, listen, you need to put something that is what we call autopilot driven, so to speak. Make it very simple for the average person. So that's where lifestyle funds came in. So the problem with that on a 401k side is if you have a lot of lifestyle funds, the cost to the company is very low because there's not a lot of management, but also the capabilities is nominal. And why is that? Well, lifestyle funds don't distinguish when they go from stock to bonds or stock to fixed. They don't necessarily distinguish by sector. So to illustrate, if I bought the S&P, everybody knows what the S&P is, you've heard that term, right? 500 companies. So the S&P is an index, and there's 500 companies in it, right? That's all it is. But it's a shotgun, you understand? So if one part of the sector, let's say healthcare and technology is doing really well, but other parts of the sector, for example, box stores or restaurants are not doing well, I wouldn't want to invest in that, right? Because that's pulling me down while the other one's going up. So lifestyle funds don't offer that capability. It's just cookie cutter. So while it's good from the aggressive side, which you just highlighted, the challenge I've always found with it is that it usually underperforms because there really is no management and there's no adjustment. And you know, over time, again, depending on what your goal is, if you want to invest and you want to have some growth, last year alone, for example, our rate of return, our account, we managed about $660 million. Last year, our yield was 42%. Most lifestyle funds, I can promise you, aren't even close to that. And that's because there's just an automatic shift. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Good. Vanguard is really big on lifestyle funds. And we deal with Vanguard a lot. We use them. Because again, guys, just to give you a backstory, we're independent. So we work with there's 4,800 different mutual fund companies out there. We work with all of them. And Vanguard we like. But the key is, remember, no one investment company has the best of everything, right? So one will have good here, one will have good there. You just want to be able to pull, you know, the good parts, so to speak, and make sure that you have a nice compilation. Any other questions? At least I kept you awake. Yes?
When do you see the economy improving?
Well, I see it improving now. I think, to be frank, I think the biggest challenge, I think they really thought I was going to go far. Look at this. The biggest challenge will be the political environment because of legislation. And the reason I bring that up is this. Previously, in my sector, we liked it when you had two opposing groups in office. And you can do your research. When you had one political party, let's say as president, and one political party in Congress, nothing got done. And that's good for the finance sector because that meant nothing changed. Does that make sense? No rule changes. So when you're in finance or in business, you want to know what's the playing field, right? You want to know, can I balance my budget? Do I know what my taxes are going to look like? All those different things. Now you don't have that. Now you have a very different agenda, right? You've got people on both parties in charge of legislation and political focus. So that creates a dynamic that could be a challenge because businesses don't know what to forecast. They don't know, like, corporate taxes going up or down. They don't know what labor costs are. Those are all big things. So I think one of two things. The economy's doing well now, but I think when you get some stabilization and you understand, right or wrong, what the financial outlook looks like when it relates to taxes, labor costs, manufacturing, where the focus will be, those are things that'll make it even stronger. So I think 2022 could be a really great year too if you get some stability either way and you just know what's happening. Does that answer your question? Good. Anything else? I think that's it. Okay, thank you so much. And I'll turn it
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jason. I'm sure he'll be around if you have any more questions. I want to thank everyone for coming out.